Hello, everyone. Today is November 1st. Can you believe it's already November? And welcome to the NEMSIS public training for November, which is titled the NEMSIS Compliance Overview and Q&A. I'm going to hand the time over to Jen Correa and Laurel Bader, who have a presentation, and then they're more than happy to take all the questions that you have. So Laurel, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Chris. That's such a nice intro. Welcome, everyone. I hope you all had a happy Halloween. And you did something fun. So this training is going to be pretty quick. I think we all know compliance inside and out at this point. So I'm just going to go over a few things, and then we're just going to launch into lots and lots of Q&A time. So if you have questions you want to ask us, if you want to tell us about things that we do that you wish we would just stop doing, or things that we don't do that you really wish we would do, this is going to be a great venue for that. So if you have feedback for us, looking really forward to getting that from you. And of course, I can at the end of the show, I will make sure that give you a reminder of where to find all of our compliance documentation, because it really is the authoritative source for almost every question that we've had. Yeah, so I'm just going to dive right in. And I've got Jen here to help answer questions as well. And I know if you've done compliance recently, you've worked with her. So she, at this point, might even be better at it than me, but we'll see. All right, so why NEMSIS compliance? We get this question a lot. Why do I have to do this testing? So this is the cornerstone of our standard. Doing this testing ensures that this standard that we have is applied accurately and uniformly across the software market. It just keeps everyone on the same page. It allows for harmonization, everyone's new favorite word, between agency software and state and national repositories and any other repositories of NEMSIS data. This is really important. This testing is really important to ensuring that data flows smoothly between those different systems, and that we can continue to have this super amazing, massive data set. So, this data set we have, it's huge, like an extremely large data set of records. I think our current warehouse right now has over 150 million records, and it's uniform. You can take the data from one state, from Hawaii, and you can compare it to the data from Montana, because it's all collected in the same way with the same elements, which is guaranteed by this compliance testing. And then I think the big part, the most important part of that is it allows us to conduct research using this data in a way that other collections of medical data can't do. So NEMSIS compliance really is the way that we ensure that we collect that better data so that providers can perform that better care through research. So if you are not convinced of the importance of NEMSIS compliance testing, I hope you are after this very short slide. So what is NEMSIS compliance? Well, it's probably not as many things as it could be. I'd say the biggest part is to ensure that the full XSDs for all of our data sets, state, demographic, and EMS, are implemented within the software. It also includes the implementation of some validation to ensure that the data that's inputted makes sense. So we also ask that the ability to implement any schematron in the software is included as a part of testing, and that all the warnings, errors, and fatal messages are displayed to the user, so that if there is a problem in the data that's entered, the user has some sort of way to take action on that. So if the times are out of order because they put in the time of arrival is before the time they left, they can have a chance to go fix that before they send their data. It also includes the ability to submit these XML data automatically via web services. This is important because it just ensures that that data is transmitted regularly. One thing that we found as our data set has grown is that moving data around takes a lot of time and effort. So if data is just automatically flowing on a regular basis, we don't have to worry so much about what happens when someone needs to send 1 million records here or there, because they probably don't have 1 million records to send, because it's happening all the time behind the scenes. It also includes the ability to create and implement custom elements in a timely manner. And this is so important because although we want everything to be uniform and comparable across the nation, we also recognize that different states and different areas are going to have different needs and might need to collect different data. So the NMSIS standard includes these custom elements as a way to address those differences that exist and also share those. So if one state develops a super cool custom element to collect patient history about international travel, it can be shared with other states so that other states who might want to collect that information can do so in the same way. And if that element is something that lots of states need to use, it can later be incorporated into the standard. So custom elements are a really important part of the standard, and that's why they're included in compliance testing. And then in a timely manner, what this means is that we expect that a custom element could be implemented within the span of time that compliance testing takes. So compliance testing is a 90-day process. So we hope that all vendors who have completed testing have the ability to create a custom element within 90 days as they're tested on. So then how often testing is completed? Every 2 years. And we have a separate testing process for each major version of the NMSIS standard. So by major version, we mean like version 3.3 or version 3.4 or version 3.5. So for example, if we move to version 3.5.1, that means your 3.5 compliance testing is still valid, but in 2 years, when it expires, you will be tested on 3.5.1. So that's how the testing applies as we go through versions. Right now we're on version 3.5, and I don't think we're going to be moving anytime soon to any new version. So the full scope of the testing is described in the testing guide, and we have a testing guide for each type and version of testing. So if you're a collect data vendor and you're down in the trenches helping the agency collect that data, we have a testing guide for you. We have a testing guide if that's 3.4 data or 3.5 data. If you're a receive and process vendor and you help states collect that agency data, aggregate it, and maybe report on it, we have a testing guide for that as well. And we've tried to be very comprehensive and specific in these testing guides so that they are relevant to the type of business your software works for, and the version of NMSIS that it works within. So that's what it is. What is not NMSIS compliance? So this could be a very long list. NMSIS compliance is not an assessment of a software's user interface or ease of use. At no point during testing do Jen or I ever open up anyone's software and test out how easy it is for us to put data in. We never make any judgments about the user interface at all, except to maybe check that there is a user interface for collect systems. It's not an assessment of the data quality of a software's created data sets. Outside of our check to ensure that Schematron is functional within the software, we do not do any additional checks to make sure that the software is creating data with a great data quality. Since so many of those decisions are software specific and really the business of the design team, we don't dig into that. If you're doing the validation that we require, the XML validation and the Schematron validation, we're not going to check any other aspects of data quality within your software. And we think that allows software vendors the ability to build software that's most relevant to their customers and best serves their customers' needs. NMSIS compliance does not include any scoring system or comparison between different companies or products. So we are not comparing company A to company B at all, ever, in any way. And we do not offer any recommendations about which software products anyone should purchase. NMSIS compliance is a yes or no. It is binary. You either passed it or you did not. And any of the finer details of, whose product is prettier or more functional or faster to use is not something that we're addressing in our testing. NMSIS compliance testing does not include a qualitative analysis of any state's provided Schematron rules or state data set. Nowhere in testing do we look at anything specific to any state. But in particular, we will not open up a state schematron rules during testing and ensure that they're logical, sensical, valid, effective. And we also do not open up any states provided state data set and ensure that the information there is correct in any way. So this is true within compliance testing and without. When states send us in their schematron and state data set resources, we check that they're technically valid, that they would pass XML validation and schematron validation, but we don't check any farther into the quality of that data provided. And then, NMSIS compliance testing doesn't test anything outside of what's mentioned in the documentation. And you can check us on that. If we ask you for something that's not in the documentation, then just let us know, and we probably can't ask you about it anymore, because it really is only what we've recorded in the documentation. Although if you do point out that we have something missing in our documentation, it's possible we'll add it next year if it is something that we should have added. So that's what NMSIS compliance is not. Okay, next up, I just have some quick FAQs, frequently asked questions that we've gotten recently that I'm going to read through, and then we can jump into any additional questions that you all might have. Okay, so first question, is it required to use the custom configuration and custom results elements to create and send custom elements? Yes, this is the only way to create and send custom elements within the standard. If you were to create custom elements by modifying the NMSIS XSDs, we would consider that non-compliant behavior. But more than that, it runs counter to our objective of having a harmonized standard that all software products share. If each state or territory or software vendor offered their own XSD, then we would no longer have that smooth interchange of data. Is a state data set required for 3.5 submission to the NMSIS Tax National Repository? Yes. So this is similar to how we want a DEM file before we get EMS files. As states are onboarded to 3.5, the first thing that we need to receive is a state data set for 3.5. Now we need this for primarily so that we can make sure that that state data set is posted on the state's page on our website, so that other third-party software vendors can access it and implement it in their software. But also just because it shows that that state has configured for 3.5 and that they're ready to go. Next up, what values should my software use for eRecord 02 and 03, which is software company and product name? So these values are up to you, but they should be consistent across all the EMS files that your products create. Your company name shouldn't change. We use the software company name to determine access to information in our software vendor report. So if your software company is named Cool EMS Software, and you log into our vendor report, you're only going to see records that were submitted where eRecord 02 says Cool EMS Software. If you called it Neat EMS Software on another record, that one's not going to show up for you. So if you want to utilize our software vendor report, I would encourage you to make sure that that information is consistent. If you are a company that acquires another product or creates another product, please ensure that your new products have the same value for eRecord 02 as your existing products. So if you acquire Neat EMS Software's product, you'll want to make sure that the records that they create after you acquire them look like they're coming from Cool EMS Software so that you can see them in your report. Okay, here's my last set of questions here. Do state products that offer a direct entry system require collect and send compliance? Yes. If your software is collecting data and creating EMS and DEM data sets, you will need to complete collect and send testing. By definition, you are a collect vendor. You are collecting data. We do this to ensure that the data that's collected is done so correctly and completely, and that all of those validation checks are in place, all that stuff on that slide about why NMSIS compliance, so that everything is uniform and can be harmonized. last question, does NEMSIS offer alternative compliance testing for fire-based or flight-based agencies? Unfortunately, the answer to this one is no. NEMSIS compliance testing is a single offering, one size fits all for any type of organization that utilizes the standard. We don't offer any partial certification in any capacity, nothing for specific states, specific territories, specific agencies, or specific use cases within agencies. And again, this just goes back to that concept of having a uniform standard. If we were to offer partial compliance that only included certain things, it would just dilute our standard. And then, you know, NEMSIS compliant might mean 5 things instead of right now where it kind of just means one thing, that you're adhering to the one true NEMSIS standard. Anyway, that's the last of my slides. So I'm happy to take questions on literally any part of my presentation or any part of compliance or any part of NEMSIS submissions. And yeah, if anyone has any specific questions for Jen, fire away.
I love that we're doing everything perfectly. So that means there's no questions at all. And it was perfect. I did just put in the chat the link to the compliance page on the nemsis.org website. And that's where all of this information can be found. And if anyone was trying to ask a question, you were probably muted.
Yeah, so here's, I opened up the page, hopefully everyone can see it. One thing I've learned about Zoom calls is the longer you sit in the uncomfortable silence, the more likely you are to get some question or feedback. But this can also be complaint time if anyone has complaints about compliance testing. But I don't know, maybe I did such a good job explaining it. No one has any complaints anymore. I doubt it though. I'm sure there are always ways we can improve.
I am not hearing any questions. That might mean this is a very short training for the month.
This is Anne. I have a question.
Hello, Anne from Arizona.
Hello. Sorry, I'm not driving right now, but I happen to be in my car. I'm parked. So if you hear a bunch of background noise. I did have a question, I think kind of more from the state perspective. I think all of our vendors really do a great job, but occasionally there's like something weird we'll see that's coming in from, an outside agency, using whatever software. And it's something that is not a state schematron error that's causing things to fail, but a schema or a NEMSIS schema error. So in the past, I've just kind of tried to address it with the vendor, and I'm fine with that answer, but I'm just wondering, because that would be something that generally shouldn't happen, because that would be part of the initial compliance testing every 2 years. Should we be interacting with NEMSIS on that, or kind of make sure everybody understands and is on the same page? Does that question kind of make sense?
It does make sense. And if you address it with your vendor and it gets resolved to your satisfaction, that's great. If there is something that we need to review on the national schematron or a rule that you'd like us to look at, please send that to us so we can at least run that up the chain and have it reviewed to see if it needs to be adjusted at all. It sounds like it might have been an XSD issue, which would usually be somewhere around a mandatory element requirement. So without seeing the specifics, I can't get too specific, but I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, the issues vary. Sometimes it's a ICD-10 code that doesn't exist. I mean, and doesn't exist in the format. And sometimes it's, you know, yeah, like something being blank that can't be blank, or not being blank that should be blank. I don't always, even to be honest, understand the messages that I see that are coming back, but it helps to know that. So we shouldn't be like, I don't know, following a process through NEMSIS for issues like that. We can just go straight to the vendor, and as long as they resolve it within a timely manner, unless we feel like there's something wrong with the national schema and schematron.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless you see it with all of your vendors across the board, and then definitely send it to us. Because if everybody's doing it, that probably means there's something on our side. But if you do find a message that you find to be confusing, or that you need us to look at, can you send that to us? You're probably, if you're confused by it, you're probably not the only one.
Yeah, I could, I mean, I don't know when I'll have time to do this, but I could send you probably a list of over the last year, the ones, they're more schema ones usually, like at line 0, 0, something not valid. Well, there's no line 0. I don't know where line 0 is. I just hope they can figure it out. Things like that are, I mean, for me, when I read it, I understand that there's going to be a technical level to that language that is not going to be really for the everyday user. But line 0, 0 doesn't mean anything to me. So yeah, I can give you a couple that, at least for me, I don't really know what they're saying. I pass them on to the vendor and hope that they can figure it out for those.
Yeah, so in the case of an XML schema error, so not schematron, but the XML schema, you are more likely than not going to see errors that aren't really written for a layman. And I think that what you've been doing is absolutely correct. You should turn those over to your vendor and let them address the issue as a bug fix. So one of the things about software, of course, is you can't test for every possible combination of elements or values that someone could put into a record. So even our most favorite vendors are going to have those kinds of bugs. So I think it's important to sort of, as your first line of defense, work through it as a bug fix, and then go from there if you continue to see lots of problems. And if you have a vendor who's repeatedly having issues with XML failure, definitely, don't be afraid to bring that to us. But, if it's an occasional thing, I would, treat it as a bug fix for them to look into. But yeah, I think there's probably, because of the way XML schema validation works, there's probably not a ton we can do to improve the clarity of those messages, because they are almost always going to include like line numbers and that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's fine. And I'll ask you guys if I have questions, I think. So thank you.
Thanks for having a question, Anne.
Jen, I'm always good for a question or an opinion. So for better or worse. Thanks.
Is there any other questions?
Okay, well, we don't have to keep everyone all day. Oh, do you see any typical errors vendors make when trying to comply? That's a great question. This is from Jeff at ProPhoenix. Usually the most frequent errors we see in compliance testing are data entry errors as vendors enter the test cases. And I will just say that I love those errors, because those errors tell me that the vendors actually entered the data into their own software and didn't use an automated process to do it. And I welcome those errors. And that's my favorite error. Another common problem we see are issues with GNIS codes, just because there are so many different codes for every city. City of blank, blank the populated place. And we try and ignore those, because I know that within GNIS, there's more than one way to say the name of a place. So those are two areas that we like or ignore. I don't know if there's anything else. I can't think of anything else. Jen, is there any other typical errors you see?
I haven't seen one that has happened to all or anything like that. And like you said, commonly it's a data entry issue. There are times where a vendor will have a rule within their software that might prevent them from filling out the compliance software the way the test case was written, and usually we just work through that with each software.
I would say another common problem I've seen over the years is software that doesn't show schematron warnings all the time or kind of hides them. And I would just say, I know people have different feelings about this in practice, but we at the TAC think that the schematron warnings are very important. And it is required that they be shown to the user, because that's how we can help users correct their data entry issues and ensure that the data they're sending is of the highest quality.
So James Fox from Sanseo says the way some states write their assert rules makes it difficult to display the errors. And do you mean the if then statements that they use within their rule, or?
Yeah, I guess I'll just unmute it, maybe a little easier. Yeah, like for example, with Alabama, they'll have multiple assert rules inside one basically group. And so it's difficult when those errors generate, because a lot of times it'll translate into like ... because there's so many different types of rules embedded into that one schematron. And I think Jen and Laura, I think you and I we talked about this when we were in Utah as well. I think this is one of those states that we discussed. So they'll have one rule, but they'll have like, yeah, if and statements, like, 15 if and statements within that one assert rule.
That makes sense. I would love to know more about that. If you happen to have an example you could point to in an email to me.
Yep, definitely.
We would love to help the states improve their schematron rules, because I think as we move forward in time and the standard becomes bigger, and not bigger, but more widespread, and more people are using it, we want to make sure that those rules are as effective and as fast as possible. So there's definitely some work that I think we all can do to improve schematron, both the way it's written, implementation, all of that. We want everyone to have the best, most effective rules they can.
And now's the perfect time as they're switching from V3.4 to V3.5 within a lot of states. Now's the time to let them know about improvements that could be made that could maybe make it easier for the end user to enter the data. Because it is pretty hard to understand an error that says, hey, you entered this, and it may be one of these 6 elements that triggered this error. So yeah, that would be good information. And then Kim Beresford from Sanseo said that they're working on 3.5 compliance at the moment, and it's difficult in their software to use a different time zone from the one they're working in, meaning they aren't working on compliance 100% of the day. We have to switch the devices, time zones back and forth. So the actual device itself. Is it okay to use a different time zone than the test case? If all times match up except for the offset from UTC. So you can submit data in UTC, or you can submit it in the time zone that's set up. That's one of the ways we, and Laurel, correct me if I get this wrong, but that's one of the ways that we're looking to make sure you can operate in different time zones.
Yeah, so the solution that Kim proposed, where they would submit the data in a different time zone, but then during the testing call, prove that they can change the time zone as needed, I would find that to be sufficient. Just so long as we can see that the time zone could be changed, and that you would still be able to output data in that time zone. So that's something we could sort of work out on a case-by-case basis, but I definitely understand that some part of testing might involve, changing the device time zone and how that could be a problem.
And just let us know ahead of time if that's the way you want it, if that there's something like that within it, so that we don't list each time element or note that in the review, that we know we have to look at that when we get on the web conference.
I will say that that is nowhere near as big of a problem as when a vendor tells me that they can't change the seconds in their times. This is minor. So all the times came across in the wrong time zone. That's fine. I can't record seconds. That's harder for me to swallow because seconds are part of the standard. Thanks for the questions, everyone. Really appreciate it. If there are no more questions, if there are, please, feel free to put them in the chat or speak up. But if there are no more questions, I'm happy to give everyone a little bit of their time back. It was because it was a short presentation intentionally. If you have questions that you'd like to email to us, our email boxes, you have our emails, are open, or you can submit help desk tickets on our NMSIS website, which Jen and I will answer. We're always looking for feedback. We're always happy to answer questions. Our goal is to, I think, make the standard as strong and effective as possible. So whatever you can give us to help us all reach that goal, I think is great, and we look forward to it. Just want to thank everyone for joining us on the call, and hope you all had a happy Halloween yesterday.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, quick mention there. Thanks. Hey, you did most of the outro, so no problem there. Monet wanted to make sure that to ask if anyone has training requests for 2023 to let us know. And I also love to let people know if you were interested in knowing when these types of trainings and announcements are going on, please go over to the NMSIS website and sign up for the mailing list through Google Groups and to all of our different social media channels. Awesome. Have a great day, everybody.